have all this technical knowledge as a player, but actually coaching and being able to deliver that to a group of players is quite a different thing. But work really hard and just try and have that unwavering self-belief.
Hello, welcome to the latest episode in Leadership Blueprint. Today, really excited to be joined by Willi Heinz. If you don't know Willi, please do look him up afterwards, but let's tell you a bit more about him. As an ex-international England rugby player, he's also played for Gloucester, Canterbury, the Crusaders. So he's had a fantastic playing career. He's now also involved in youth development, which I want him to talk a little bit more about from a leadership perspective in a moment. He's also gone and done his master's in, I need to check this again, in sports directorship, which was done at Salford University. And we were chatting beforehand. That's actually where I did my own degree as well. So there's some of those connections. Willi and we got talking at the Rugby Sevens where JRH Partners was sponsoring Riyadh Rugby. And I think just again, some of the stories, some of the ideas, some of the way that Willi was talking about some of the leadership lessons that he's learned just made him an obvious guest for today's podcast. So let's sort of get into it. So Willi, thanks so much for joining us. And if you could give the audience a little bit more of an intro to what I've just said there, that'd be great. And then we'll jump into a couple of the questions and build things from there. So once again, thanks for joining us. And over to you, man.
Oh, awesome. No problem at all. Thanks for having me, Ollie. I guess it's a pretty conclusive summary of my rugby career. I guess just to give a little bit more background, I was born and raised in New Zealand, in Christchurch, which is in the South Island of New Zealand. Grew up mad about rugby, as a lot of kids do in this country. So sort of dreamed of playing for Canterbury and the Crusaders. They were my two local professional teams that I aspired to be a part of. So a dream come true to play for those teams. Did kind of 6 or 7 seasons, started in 2009. So about 6 seasons here with both of those teams before making the decision to come across to the UK with my young family, my wife and 3 kids. And we joined the Gloucester Rugby Club, which again was a huge eye-opener. Rugby's played differently up in that part of the world, so it took a little bit of getting used to. But again, an incredible experience. And the Gloucestershire region became our home. We've got some of our closest and dearest friends still there. We miss them a lot, actually, now that we've moved back to New Zealand. But had an unbelievable experience, just short of 8 years over there. Obviously, being able to play for England during that period, which I'm sure we'll touch on at some point as well, was an incredible experience. And then in 2022, we made the decision to move back to New Zealand just to be closer to our wider families. Both Sophie and I's parents aren't getting any younger, and so we just wanted to give the children the opportunity to be back around their grandparents and their cousins and stuff like that. So here we are, found ourselves back in New Zealand, and I've just recently retired from playing, managed to nick another couple of years once I got back here, which was really cool. Just going through that transitional process out of being a professional rugby player for a long time and finding my way in the real world now.
Yeah, and I think it's really nice there as well, the kind of, done the expat life, but now coming back for the kids and the family and everything. It's a lovely story as well, on sort of all fronts. So one of the bits we mentioned there, and I'm sure this will be one that's interesting, is obviously New Zealand born and bred, but played for England. Now, we spoke about this before. So obviously your grandmother was born in Hampshire. Did that kind of, what was the part where you decided, right, England is for me? What was the story around sort of your grandmother playing for England, the moving to this part of the world? Again, let's sort of start there and we'll work our way through this, because I think that's a really interesting one.
Yeah, so my grandmother was born in a place called Bishop's Waltham in Hampshire, and she was about 20 to 21, 22, something like that. And obviously World War II had kicked off, and she was a Wren for the Navy over there. My grandfather, who was a Kiwi, he was in the New Zealand Navy, and he was posted to Southampton. And as these things do happen, they met and hit it off pretty quickly. And within a space, from what I understand in the stories I've been told, within the space of a few months, she was on a boat. They were married. She was on a boat out to New Zealand as a young woman in her early 20s, which is just an incredibly brave thing for her to do. You think about the enormity of that decision and leaving behind everything to go to a place that you've never been for love. It's quite a story, really.
Oh, yeah.
And then I guess you fast forward a few years and a couple of generations later, and I came along and my grandmother, so she obviously moved to New Zealand, had a family with my grandfather, and she never went back to England. I think she went back to England once in the rest of her whole life. So in some ways a little bit sad as well that she didn't get back, because she was very close with her family. But that's the way it was back then a little bit. But anyway, my grandfather passed away when I was quite young, and then so my grandmother moved in with us, and so she was a huge part of our family. I was really close with her, and she was an avid sports fan, sports watcher, but she was also a very proud English woman. And being in a country like New Zealand, where we're pretty proud of our sports teams as well, there was no blurred allegiances for her. It was always England. And I can remember getting up in the middle of the night and watching test matches, and it was very much she was absolutely going for England, whether it was rugby, cricket.
Was there a divided house? Were allegiances very divided?
Probably a little bit, although it was really only me and her that were the avid sports fans. The rest of my family are quite sort of artsy and musical, but anyway. So I guess that really rubbed off on me, and she passed away in 2008, just before I started playing the game professionally. But she always said to me, if you ever get the chance to go to England, and even if it's just to travel, or if you get the chance to go there and live there, obviously we get our ancestry visas through her, and she was just really encouraging of that. And so in the back of my mind, once I did get into professional rugby, it was something that I always wanted to do. It was always, if I could establish myself in New Zealand and, make a little bit of a name for yourself, then the opportunity might come up at some point to go over to the UK and sink your teeth into a club and see what happens from there. But, I never had any grand ideas that I was going to come over to England and walk straight into the England team or anything like that. Let's be clear around that. It was more around the opportunity to go and play for Gloucester, take my family to a new part of the world, and just immerse ourselves in a new culture that I had this connection with, but I didn't know anything about.
It's really cool. I think that's really interesting there. From, again, it goes back to culture. Culture's kind of everything: sport, business, life, love. And I think it's really interesting there to see the connection that you have with your grandmother. The bit I wanted to pick on really quick was, you mentioned there that pretty much the rest of the family was, more arts and sort of drama and things driven. At what point did you know rugby was something that was more than just a passion? When was it the passion was driven by the relationship with your grandmother, and then it kind of blossomed from there? Or was it, you're just naturally talented in it? There's always a bit of chicken and egg. Kind of, how did it go from one to the other? Because normally if the family's pushing you in one direction, that's normally where people go. So I'm always intrigued where somebody goes against the grain a little bit and discovers themselves. What kind of drew you that way?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I've thought about this probably a lot more as I've got a bit older, but I can just always remember absolutely loving the game. And it wasn't necessarily just rugby, but I just love sport in general. And so I just always had that intrinsic motivation, in the afternoons, as soon as I got home from school, throw the bag in, grab a bag of balls, down to the field, kicking balls around. I just loved it, So
yeah,
and I wasn't pushed in any direction from my parents or anything like that. They were just, I would say they were highly supportive, but they weren't pushy in any way. My dad was is a pretty amazing jazz guitarist, and he
cool.
Equally, he never pressured me to get into music or the guitar or anything like that. But I think the thing that he probably did manage to get through to me, and again, it wasn't anything that he was ramming down my throat, but I just saw his dedication to his craft. Every day he was practicing. In the morning on his guitar, he'd go to work. He worked as a music teacher, come home, would have dinner, and then he was back in the study, just chipping away on his guitar. So I just saw that habit and the process that he was he was driven towards, and maybe subliminally that rubbed off on me, with my sport as well.
Yeah, I mean, it goes again just back to that sort of the passion piece. As we were talking beforehand, I originally had a very different career to what I'm doing now, and I just didn't have the passion in that, and eventually kind of discovered a bit more of a passion, and was happy with that, and made the transition. I think it's good to try things, but there is that if you find the passion, you've got to grab it with both hands. So no, absolutely. So looking at the earlier part of your career, so before you'd gone professional, are there any kind of, or what is the sort of standout memory from the earlier parts of your career where you say, this was a really important lesson that I learned, maybe from the team, maybe from a match, maybe from an opponent, or even your coach, that you just said, this really helped me get the focus or increase the focus to make that next step in the transition? Because there's a lot of people that are very talented, but making that next step is only the 1%ers kind of do that. And was there any standout moments where you say, these things kind of helped me make that step? Is there any sort of 1, 2, 3 memories that really kind of these things really helped?
Yeah, I think there's probably one standout moment, and that was, I think it was around maybe 2006 to 2007, 8, something like that. And we had a couple of trial games for the Canterbury team, and typically the way it works here, there's different sort of opportunities to get your way into professional rugby, whether it's through you're a standout school player and you go straight in, or you come through the club rugby system or the academy system. And I was kind of involved in the academy system and playing club rugby, and that was my, I guess, opportunity to get in. But you still got to prove yourself through trial matches. And I remember this particular season I'd played really well, the previous club season, and people were sort of saying, you'd be a good opportunity to get into the Canterbury team this year. And I trialed, and deep down I knew that I didn't have a very good game, but people were still telling me, filling you with a little bit of hot air probably, that we think you're going to be in the team this year. And when I sat down with the coach and he explained the reasons why I'm not in the team, and actually all of the reasons he had previously I guess already told me, but I just hadn't listened. And I'd gone into that game and made some mistakes and probably played myself out of the team more than anything, just because I hadn't actually listened to the original feedback that had been giving me. And that was a bit of a square up moment around, Shivers, you had a really good opportunity here. You've blown it because you've probably been a bit pig-headed thinking you knew it all. And from there, it was like, okay, I need to actually start humbling myself a little bit, listening to the feedback I'm getting from these coaches, and then making a plan on how I'm going to apply it. And I think, that was a bit of a turning point moment for me, because I missed out on the team that year, and then made the team the following year. And sort of often the hardest part is making those teams. Yeah, so you've got to find your way.
100%, 100%. And I think it's a really good one to say, and literally the next year you made it. And I think I remember, the start of my career, I went for interviews with a certain set of firms, stunk the place out, got some feedback. Then the next week went for interviews with technically better firms, and I got two out of 3 offers, because I'd listened to even within a week, I approached it in a very different way and did things very different. So I think the taking on feedback is so important. And I think, it's just, I think people assume incorrectly that obviously sport is just based on talent. It's all the emotional, the mental side that goes with it. And I think this is why sport, business, and everything is so intertwined with, the mental health piece that is needed there. Mentally you need to be strong for professional sport, but mentally, sport can help you in so many other ways. So yeah, it's really good and interesting to hear that side. So you mentioned earlier, obviously moving hemispheres, different style of rugby play. How did later in your career now, but how did you kind of make that transition? What were the main differences? And obviously a playing style, but I mean, the main differences in terms of how you had to approach the team, or the team's approach, or culturally Gloucester operated very different, so therefore you had to, you had to go about things in a slightly different way. I'm just intrigued to see it's a multi-layered thing that was different. You moved the team, the ethos, everything. So kind of what were some of those steps and lessons learned, and how did that kind of work for you?
Yeah. Oh, look, you're 100% right. It's not just the playing style that's different. The boys are different. The coaching's different. The way the week's structured's different. The environment's completely different, physically, emotionally, mentally. All those things are really different. So it takes a bit of time. Like, I think first things first, you got to understand and appreciate that it's going to take a little bit of time. So get over there, breathe a wee bit, understand that you might not play the house down straight away. Maybe you will, and some guys manage to, but it can take guys, maybe a season or a season and a half just to get their head around things. And because not only are you learning a new way of playing, but you're meeting new people and you're developing relationships and developing important relationships, particularly as a halfback. You need to get to know the 10s really well, and the fullbacks and the number 8s and all those things. Like, there's no replacement for time. So you've just got to allow space for that. Probably the best piece of advice I got given was by Rob Penny, who coached me here with Canterbury. And I had a coffee with him before we were leaving to go to Gloucester, and he said, and it was a great bit of advice because I've seen players do this the other way and it is a car crash. But he said, when you get to Gloucester, just 100% buy into whatever they're doing, however they're playing the game, whatever their environment is, buy in, no dipping your toes in, you're in, jumping in, fully clothed 100%, and you'll actually find that in time you'll love it. But if you go over there and you try and make it the Crusaders, or you try and make it Canterbury, you'll be hitting your head against the brick wall. The boys will think you're a dickhead, and it just won't work out. And it was a great bit of advice. So actually just go over there and sit back for a start and just listen and observe and see what you can find out, and just slowly don't force it too much. All those wee sort of soft skills that you learn on relationship building and that sort of thing. So really good advice, because like I say, I've seen a couple of guys do it the other way, and it's from the best intentions. They're going over there and they just want the team to do really well straight away, and I've seen a really good way of doing it in another environment. So it's not that it comes from a bad place, it comes from a great place, but just doesn't go down quite so well.
No, 100%. And is there a point where you mentioned, you sort of sit back, you immerse yourself in it, but at the same time you sit back, you don't try and impart yourself too much because you want to learn the lay of the land. Equally, you're trying to learn the team, learn the differences. So you're, in your own words, you're kind of maybe not hitting your full stride straight away. How did you kind of manage probably what felt like a little bit of stress going, I know I can do better here, but I've got to take baby steps to get there. If I rush this, I could get it all wrong and there's no kind of going back. But at the same time, it's not even like a work environment where, I'll come back tomorrow. It's, professional sport, eyes are on you on the pitch. Is it a different type of stress? Is there ways that you had to try and sort of self-manage that piece of, don't stick to the program, don't try and run, this will all go wrong if I run? How did you kind of manage that piece? Because I'm sure there's a bit where you're going, I could do more here, I could do something a bit more, but I've got to try and get the balance.
Yeah. I think I see what you mean. I think I had enough going on around trying to learn the new style of play, learn about my teammates, all those sorts of things, that I wasn't too concerned with trying to do too much. I was just trying to get in there and nail my job. And to be honest, I didn't really. The first season I actually didn't play very well. I was just okay, but it was such a shock to me. Like, I remember my first game, we played Newcastle away Friday night, freezing cold, and I box kicked the ball something like 24 or 26 times in one game, and I wouldn't have done that in the season back in Super Rugby. And it was just such a shock to my system of like just all this expectation on me to control the game out of our half as a halfback. I hadn't really felt that before. So yeah, actually, you're right. There probably was an element of stress on me, but I was probably just so busy and in the moment trying to learn and adapt all those things. Yeah, I guess I managed to get through it without having a massive mental breakdown.
A testament to you, honestly. So in terms of, as we said, you've the career's been fantastic. At a certain point, when did England come knocking on the door, or was a conversation happening aside from it, and you did you have to give a bit of a nod that you'd be open to a conversation to play for England, or did they instigate that? Because it wasn't, a natural. The guy could do it due to heritage, but it's not. New Zealand were probably also trying to tell you as well. I just wondered, how did that conversation ever come about? Was it them? Was it you? Was it subconscious thing? How did it kind of?
Yeah, so I'm not 100% sure how it works in the background, but I guess all the clubs would have to submit a list of English qualified players, and I was obviously one of those. So you probably just get put into a database that Eddie Jones at the time as the coach could see, and then my first indication of potentially being involved was at the end of the 2017 season. I think it was 2017-18, and we just played a European Challenge Cup final in Edinburgh, and the next morning woke up with a bit of a sore head, as you do, and I had a message from our director of rugby just saying, come down and see me in the hotel lobby, and he said, you've been selected in one of the England training camps coming up next weekend or next week. And I was pretty sort of stunned and taken back. I didn't realise that I was on the radar at all. But that was really cool. The reason I was probably involved in that camp was the Premiership finals were on in the coming weeks, so there were a number of players at the time unavailable. So, but either way, it was still very cool to get the invite and go along to that camp and just get a little taste and meet Eddie and hear what he had to say. And he just sort of said, you are still down the pecking order at this stage, but we just wanted to have a look at you and go back to your club, play well, and we'll see what happens in the future. So, and that really was the extent of the conversation.
Yeah.
The next couple of seasons, I had a really bad run of injuries, calf problems, a couple of concussions, a hamstring problem, and I just never really got any consistent rugby going over the next couple of years. It must have been sort of 17, 18. And then going into 2019, we were playing some really good rugby at Gloucester. We had a couple of new players join us. Danny Cipriani was on fire for the club. And we were just in a really good place as a team, playing really consistent footy, which meant most of the players in the team were playing consistent rugby. And then I just got a text out of the blue. It was about February, March time in 2019, and it was from Eddie saying, mate, you're playing really well. We want to catch up with you. We'll see you at the meetings in Bristol soon. And I was just like, wow, how good's this?
And you guys literally hadn't spoke for a couple of years?
No comms for a couple of years, yeah.
Wow,
yeah.
Okay. You always assume there's a bit of like communication going in between, but it's literally out the blue. Okay, interesting.
No, just a couple of one-line text messages, and that sort of let me know that I was back in the mix for 2019.
That's cool. So we talked about moving to Gloucester and the change in the environment there, an England camp and beyond. How does that change? Because technically, the players are probably a bit more. There's probably less difference in the players, but they're all coming from different clubs. All the clubs play differently, and it is one of those. You have a different coach. How did the kind of somebody else giving you a set of instructions, a set of leadership, and everyone coming with their own sort of, all the other time of the year I'm being taught by somebody else. How does that kind of work? You're switching from one mindset to another and for a short period of time and then going back. How do you kind of, did you see people that just weren't able to do that transition that should have? How did you kind of, I'm just intrigued on the club country nuances.
Yeah, I can see how from the outside looking in that that could easily happen, or that might be the perception that would happen. I guess this is, again, this is my own experience under Eddie in England. And, other players have been quite public recently around their own experiences, which I didn't share them at that perspective at all. But I guess a couple of things that I would say around what I found when I was in with England was, it was what I loved about it. It was, for me, it was the pinnacle of high performance in our sport. You're playing for one of the top nations in the world. You're very lucky in that there's sort of no expenses spared when it comes to the overall program. They throw so many different resources at the program, which allow you as the player and the athlete to literally be the best that you can be. From a physical resource perspective, from a human resource perspective, there's just so many different people all geared and equipped to helping you be the best player you can be on a Saturday or whatever day the test match is. So, for me, looking forward now as I transition out of the game and I'm getting into coaching and managing and running a rugby club with a lot less resource, I can guarantee you, that I found that quite inspiring. I think back to those experiences and I just think, how can I leverage off some of those experiences I've had within that environment to make this the best environment we can make it. I guess the other thing that I loved about the Eddie Jones coaching mantra, if you like, was just how simple he kept it. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. It's not as though, he just had a way of creating the environment to be that everybody was so clear around what they were doing, and we obviously made the final of the Rugby World Cup in 2019, which tells you that the team were going pretty well. And just his way of simplifying the game, simplifying the messaging to each group of players based on your position. I'll give you an example. When I went for that meeting with him in Bristol in 2019, a few months prior to the naming of the squads, I sat down with him and he explained the current situation with halfbacks with England. And he said, we've had Ben Youngs as our starting halfback, and then we've kind of had a couple other guys that we thought we wanted in terms of the X factor and the ability to change a game. But what we've found is that in the last 20 minutes of these test matches in 2018, we've been losing because we just haven't been, and it wasn't necessarily the halfback's fault, but we just needed a continuation of what Ben Youngs had been doing for 55, 60 minutes. And we just needed someone come on and just be really solid for us. So he said, all I want to see from you is that you go back to your club and you pass well, you kick well, and you energize the forwards. And he said, if you can do those three things, you'll be in the camps. You'll be in the preseason training camps. That's cool. And that was like the meeting was all over in about 3 minutes. And I walked out of there just thinking, how good's that? Like, he has just made the game so simple for me. He has put the ball back in my court. He's made it really achievable. What good coaching that is, and now that I am 100%. Involved in coaching, it's probably the thing that I'm learning, and I'm very new to it still. The hardest thing is keeping things simple. Like, you've got all this information and stuff going on in your head, and you just want to tell the players all this stuff, and you do, and you're just regurgitating all this information, and then you get to the end of it. I had it yesterday. I was doing a one-on-one with this young kid doing some box kicking, and I reflected afterwards, and I was thinking to myself, I've just given him so much information. His head will just be scrambled now. Whereas, pull back, simplify it, let him figure it out. Like, let him go through a process of self-discovery and, give him 2 or 3 things like Eddie gave to me, and let him work out, what does that mean? How do I apply that? How do I achieve that? That's way more powerful. So, yeah. Sorry, I've got off tangent there a little bit.
No, I love it. And I think it's there's some really important bits there around the simplifying of the message and acknowledging it's so easy to be passionate and give too much info. And I think, you see this in sport and business, where the clearer the message from the CEO, the clearer the message from your line manager, the easier it is to get it done. And it doesn't mean, like you were trying to say, it doesn't mean that it's a simple non-complex thing, but if you just break down a complex task into simple bite-sized pieces, it gets a hell of a lot easier. And again, it's why training courses are bite-sized pieces. They're not just one big long blurb. So yeah, it's it sounds obvious, but I think it's something we're all guilty of, not doing at times. And again, it's that sort of step back piece. So for you then, over the kind of playing career, what were kind of some of the most what was the point where you knew, I want to go into coaching, I want to focus on the youth side, at least for now? I mean, okay, because you're kind of doing youth and a club as well, but some people go, I just want to do the club side. Some people say, I want to just do the youth. You've kind of done a bit of both. Where did you kind of say, this is what's next to me? I mean, because again, you've gone down the NBA route as well, although it's within sport. But did you think of getting involved in other aspects of the game? But what kept you in the day-to-day part as opposed to going something a bit more backseat, and then kind of let's start with there and go from that.
Yeah, well, I guess just to give a quick overview of what I'm currently doing. So I'm working for one of the local rugby clubs in Christchurch as the rugby director here. So sort of in charge of overseeing all things rugby operations at the club. So recruitment, retention of players and coaches, working with coaches around the type of rugby program that we're delivering to our players, and that's both at senior and junior level. And then the other part that I'm doing is I'm working with one of the local high schools as their first 15 assistant coach this year. So I guess just to sum it up, I've probably got $1 each way a little bit between the off-field managerial sporting director kind of role that I've done a little bit of study in, but also having recently played the game, love the game, keen to give the coaching side of things a crack as well. And I guess there's always a little bit of a decision to make when you're sort of recently retired. Some guys go straight back into the professional environment and start coaching straight away, which is cool if the opportunity is there for them and they feel ready. I thought about it and I sort of looked at it and looked at a couple of the coaches that I guess I consider mentors and guys that I'm still quite close with, and look at the pathway or the journey that they went on. When they retired from playing, they kind of went back to the grassroots of the game. It doesn't really matter who you're coaching, whether it's at club level, school level, A's, B's, C's, D's, whoever. Just get back and coach and start to learn. Get back and coach and start to learn your craft a little bit, because you have all this technical knowledge as a player, but actually coaching and being able to deliver that to a group of players is quite a different thing. And I guess I'm going with the mantra of I don't need to be in a rush, but I need to be ready, because when the opportunity does come, hopefully at some point in the professional ranks, you need to be ready to take those, because if you don't, I think some guys probably get spat out pretty quickly because your reputation's kind of everything, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think, look, it gets you a different type of credibility in the bank as well. Because, if you go into something too quick, it's just off the back of being a great player, but can you translate that into being the coach? Whereas you're kind of building that foundation to build extra credibility as well. When you mentioned there recruitment and so on, what are some of the key traits that you would look for in a player today? And is that different? Because obviously the game's evolved as well and things, but also culture has evolved. Are there things that the modern day player, are there certain traits that are very different to when you were starting out? And I mean, that, forget this, that playing style is slightly changing things, but in terms of the individuals, because of social media and other things, are you having to manage them in a slightly different way? And what are some of the lessons you're kind of saying, look, I was doing this, but it was in a different world. I'm trying to help you in this world. Yeah. How have you got that sort of balance?
Yeah. Again, I'm still really new to it. Like we're in our preseason. So I've kind of done the recruitment side of things through the back end of last year, kind of our springtime here in New Zealand. And then we've just started our preseason training with the club this week. And then school preseason starts in a couple of weeks. So from an on-field not necessarily the technical characteristics, but like the mental fortitude and the resilience piece. I'm still to see that yet from the players. Like I don't know what they're going to be like. From a recruitment perspective, my approach was just to meet with people one-on-one so that I could sit down with them, have a conversation, get a little bit of a feel for their background, where they're from, what sort of families are they from, talk to them a little bit about the game, and you start to get a little bit of a read of what they like. But until we kind of see them out on the field and put under some duress and fitness sessions and conditioning sessions and things like that, the jury's still out a little bit. I guess what I'm looking for, and the message I gave at our club preseason we just started this week, was the biggest thing for me that whether you're a Div 1 player here or you're playing for the social team or somewhere in between, to get the best out of the preseason, you just got to keep showing up, and that's the almost the little catch cry that I'm trying to give to our club members this preseason is just show up. Like, just get yourself to the field, get yourself to the white lines, get ready to go, and then you can actually start to realise the benefits of a 6 to 8 week preseason where we're going to work you hard. Like I want to make it tough. I want to make it difficult. I want to make it challenging. So that when we get to the games, when we start playing the actual games, that they're in a really good space for it. They're well prepared for it. Whereas if they show up Monday, but then they don't come Wednesday, and then they don't show up for a week, and then they decide to come, they'll still make it some games, but they won't see the true benefit if they just front up, even when they don't feel like it. Just front up, and then we can start to really see some change.
Yeah, 100%. And we were sort of talking a little bit about this before we got on to the episode today. In terms of sort of transition, the rugby as a whole, the support network, and the transition of next steps. I know you're early in the transition journey and so on, but from a support network, so what I'm trying to get at is, what are some of the things that you would like to see rugby from a leadership and support stance on an individual basis? So I don't mean like funding, but I mean physically, like the support of players on the mental side, the support of players in terms of the training side. What would be some of those things that you think rugby could benefit from if certain changes were made? I.e., you've been fortunate in where you've gone, but obviously there are others that maybe didn't have the right support or didn't make it to a certain level or didn't have an opportunity. Are there things that the game could do more to support those people? So this is more of a leadership to help people in the next stages of career and life, because obviously, sport does have an end date, unlike business technically does, but business is more of a retirement date and you get to do other things. But in sport, you've still got a life afterwards. Is there is there things that you've seen where the game from a leadership perspective could help support people more in that way? What would be some of those tweaks that you would change?
Yeah, I think on the whole, I think rugby does it pretty well. In my experience in the UK and in New Zealand, we have in New Zealand the New Zealand Rugby Players Association, and then the Rugby Players Association up in the UK, and that's a highly supportive environment. Both of those organisations, and they put a lot of time and effort into helping guys prepare for life after rugby, and that's pretty comprehensive through educational opportunities, vocational opportunities, financial literacy, and everything that goes along with that. Getting mortgages, insurances, all of those sorts of things. What I would say, if there was one, not criticism, but one thing that they could consider would be maybe some of the guys that don't have a very long career. So, they might be in for 1 or 2 years. It doesn't work out for whatever reason, and then they're out the back door. So they haven't really built up any kind of capital. They would have been on not a lot of money in those early years of their career. How well are we supporting those guys as they leave the game? Part of it, I do think, as the player and as the athlete and as an adult, it's a little bit of, you can lead the horse to water. But I think on the whole, the players got to take some control there and actually take the lead. And if they need help, they need to be able to step forward and ask for that help.
Yeah.
I guess the bit where maybe they could do it better is whoever those player development managers are, identify the guys that maybe won't step forward naturally if they do need help, and red flag those guys a little bit to follow up with them when they do leave their environments. But on the whole, honestly, I do think that those rugby development programs are done pretty well.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. I hadn't quite appreciate the extensiveness of it. So I mean, that side's very good, but I think it's a really good point raised around just keeping an eye out for the ones that maybe, it's not everyone's strength to put the hand up. So, I think that's a really good point.
I think the other thing that good rugby environments do, and I think it's on the whole pretty good at most clubs or international teams, is that you get taught to lead yourself really well. So what I mean by that is you're expected to take control of your career. You're expected to know where to be, what to be wearing, what sort of mindset to turn up with for any given session, whether that's a classroom session, a gym session, a field session. You're expected to sit down on a Sunday night and plan your week out. So the game itself actually teaches you some really good transferable skills. So hopefully a lot of guys, when they do leave their environment, it can be, and I'm going through it myself, it can be daunting going into the real world, but hopefully the game has actually taught you some really beneficial things that set you up well for the next chapter.
No, absolutely. And this might seem like a strange question, but go with me. What's one of the biggest lessons the game has taught you that you find that people outside the game just don't get, or it doesn't translate as well? Yeah.
I don't know if it's I don't know if it's a massive. It's not a massive secret, so I'm probably copping out here, not answering the question properly. But I think that one of the biggest things that the games helped teach me, and then I've maybe come to realize it a little bit myself in my later years, was just around just falling in love with the process and not being too goal driven. I think sometimes when you're like, you've got to have a vision or a North Star of what you want to achieve. And you always, in a rugby team, you always do. All teams want to win the competition or whatever that might be. That's fine. But if we just focus on that all the time, we actually lose sight of the how. And the how is the thing that you've got to do every day. And I heard a good quote the other day, and it was around, we don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the levels of our systems and processes. Yeah. So 100%. So if you can actually just be fully committed to nailing each day, having a plan, every day turn up and just be where your feet are and just love that process, you actually just start enjoying it a whole lot more. And the other problem with being overly goal driven is that we often delay our happiness to wait and see the outcome of that goal. And either we achieve the goal and we feel great for a small portion of time, or we don't achieve the goal and we're even more deflated. But that might be a 6-month or 12-month goal, and that whole time we've sort of delayed our just daily happiness. And what's the point in that? Yeah.
No, 100%. And from a sort of latching on the back of that, and these are obviously lessons that you've learned over time, so you've noticed yourself probably doing them, learned from them, try to not do them better the next time, etc. But at times when in the career you were missing a goal, injured, you weren't hitting the target that you wanted, you're going to be taking that home. How did you get the balance of the missing a goal and not impacting the family life as much? Because obviously, loving father, 3 kids, etc. But it's hard not to take it home. There are definitely, and you hear a lot where people say, "Oh, I work every hour God sends, and then I'll spend time with my kids when I retire," and that's not been the case with yourself. So, how did you kind of get that balance going through it?
Yeah. Short answer is I definitely didn't. I spent I spent countless Friday, Saturday, Sunday evenings after results, just writing the highs or lows of the result, and my wife, God bless her, she had to write it with me, and she was so good. She was such a great sounding board for me when I'd get home at the end of the game, however it went. And she was probably the level head. She was the one that probably helped me get back to zero and go again the following week, But particularly when you haven't played well or the team hasn't played well, the result hasn't gone your way, it's just so easy to get caught in that spiral of throwing the baby out with the bathwater and everything's crap and sort of moping into Monday. And I've definitely felt that at different points in my career. Again, sorry, I'm getting a bit philosophical with quotes and stuff now, but the other one that I reckon is really cool is Rudyard Kipling, when he said, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters the same. And if I'd known that at the start of my career and had been able to apply it, I just think that ability to, how did it go? Did it go really well? Okay, well, what did you learn? How did it go? Did it go really badly? Yep. Okay, well, what did you learn? So that's that constant reflection and learning cycle of just not riding those waves quite so much. I think naturally as humans, we're emotional creatures, aren't we? We're always going to ride the wave a little bit, but if we can just have a little bit of calm along with it, to help you get through those moments and just continually looking to see how you can get a little bit better and just improve a little bit more. Yeah, that's quite a neat way to go.
It's a really good way, and it's a great quote as well. And I think it's a really good point raised there, because it's something on when we're talking to candidates and clients around next steps and finding talent, is getting them to reflect on the best roles they've had and the worst roles they've had and the reasons why. And then there's traits that come out of that in terms of things that they work better in as a culture, businesses they relate more to. And I think your points there of, when a game has gone really well, reflecting on the good stuff, but then also reflecting on the bad stuff and trying to, like I said, meet both sides of that equation and understand it. It makes it a little less. We're not talking about diminishing the highs, but maybe just bringing the lows up a little bit and just balancing things out a bit. Because although it's great to have the highs, too high and too low, it's just exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting, and that's that's me not talking about playing in World Cups and things. So God knows what it's like for you guys. But and
when I think of the best players that I played with, the guys that lucky enough to play with a couple of 100-test All Blacks and some of the and 100-test England players, those guys that have just consistently done it week after week. I was there for a very small amount of time with England, a couple of years, but those guys forge out 10-year careers at that level. I just and being able to observe their mindset and their ability to, good, bad, or in between, just keep fronting up every day with that pursuit of getting better and the mental fortitude to do that. Like that's where the high performance lives, I think, when you can start getting into that mental state. And I admire those guys so much to be able to do that with such longevity.
No, 100%. And that kind of takes us, I think, really well into kind of the closing up bit, because I could definitely talk to you all day, but I know you've got other things to jump onto here. But if you were to kind of start, give us a kind of 2 or 3 sort of closing statements and maybe this is a direct message you've been sent to some of the players potentially. So from a youth player of today, sort of messages that you would say to them in terms of, and this can be things we've said today in the episode or just things we haven't said today in the episode, but you would say, if I was having a conversation with a young player today, these would be things that I would impart onto them from a getting the right motivation and growth side. For a bit of a message you give a younger yourself, so kind of your the biggest bit of reflection on your career today, if I could do this a bit better or different, this would be something I would do. And then just generally if there's another closing remark, quotes, anything like that so 2 or 3 things. They can be loosely around those sorts of topics. I think they're always really, really nice sort of sound bites to sort of close out the episode, because it's been a really good one for sure.
Yeah, I think we've probably touched on some of the key things that I've learned throughout my career. If I could go back, to a 16, 17-year-old as I was just coming, you're sort of emerging into those key years, getting into academies, those sorts of things. For me as a halfback, absolutely, but I think it's probably the same for most positions. Learn the game, understand what's going on in a game, the tactics, the momentum. Part of that is you've got to go through it to learn it, but just watch rugby and try to figure out and understand what's happening. I know when I was sort of 18, 19, I just got obsessed with all the physical things, so got really fit, got really strong, all those things, which would have happened anyway, just in the program that I was in. But I didn't spend enough time learning the game, having conversations about the game, watching the game, and just practicing my skill set. I got too caught up in all those physical things.
Yeah,
that would be one. Self-belief's a huge thing, I think, and it's something that often the damage is done before you even get to those years. It's often done really early in life, but just trying to find ways to just be unwavering in your self-belief. Why can't it be you? That's something that a coach said to me one day that always stuck with me. Like, if it's not you, it's just the next bloke down the street. Why is he any more special than you? So go and get it. Go out there and work really hard. Like nothing's going to get handed to you on a plate, but work really hard and just try and have that unwavering self-belief, because it is really important. Yeah.
No, they're really interesting, and I think it's what I've always find fascinating about and why we did the podcast episodes is, yes, a business, a leadership, but what's really interesting is from a sports perspective, there's so many parallels, and you can see why fitness, mental health, everything ties in, because there are so many things that drive on a sports side that are key in business. And that's, as you said, some of the lessons you've learned from rugby set you up very well for that sort of next step in the career, and whether that's within sport, whether that's within leadership, whether that's in the corporate world, you take those lessons and you move them through. So I think it is back to the self-belief, it is back to the culture, it is back to that sort of passion, and then just turning up every day and directing in the right way. And I think all of those things we've covered today are super just really nice to tie it all together, and B, just I think just a great conversation to kind of put all those things together. So look, from my side, I've really enjoyed today. I hope the listeners have as well. Please do subscribe to the channel, do share this episode as well. We are continuing to grow, so please, keep helping us to grow it further, everyone. And look, Willi, thanks so much today. I've really enjoyed it, and we'll be catching up again soon for sure. And thanks so much for your time, mate. Cheers.
No worries. Thanks for having me, Ollie. Cheers.
Thanks, mate.